I think that sounds perfect.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to the Reality Bath experience here at Beringia House. First off, just want to thank you guys again for coming in. Tonight is all about climbing history. It's the past, it's the present, all coming together for the first time right here, right now. Woo! Second, I just want to thank Twight and Balin Miller. Thank you guys for coming in, being willing to share your experiences so that the rest of us can even just try to get a snippet of that experience and all of your accomplishment along with it. So let's give it up for these guys, huh? A few things before we start. First off, if you want a free beer, and who doesn't want free beer, make sure you go check out Beringia right up front and grab your raffle tickets. By the way, everything in store tonight is going to be 30% off, so if there was that one Beringia item that you've had your eye on, tonight's the night to grab it. So without further ado, Mark, 37 years later, you ready to go back?
Let's
So I'm going to put some microphones on us because, I don't know, this just seems fucking cool. And we'll record a podcast later for It Keeps Solitaire podcast. And I want to have some snippets from this just in case somebody asks a funny question later or some shit like that. And I don't want to call that good. It's like a rope. But what would you know about that? Record. We're going to hope for the best. You know what's going to happen here, right? So Balin and I met, apparently, at a presentation I gave at another shop here in town, Uphill Pursuits, a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to sit because maybe I should stand. And I signed a book and then never thought any more about it. And for the last decade up until maybe 2-3 years ago, I was a bit of a curmudgeon about the state of climbing. Because I didn't think any of these kids had any relationship with history, didn't respect the history. They drilled bolts in places on routes that have been, for the first ascents, have been made by traditionalists using traditional means, stuff like that. I was just disappointed. And then some shit started happening. Slovak got repeated in 21 hours. Granted, it was 20 years later. I just have to say shit like that sometimes. Anyway, and then one day it was, and there was after that there was this new route on the Diamond of Red and Mount Hunter, and route on Mount Dickey, and then some other stuff. It was like, man, there's hard things being tried in the Himalayas right now by this younger generation or generations of climbers. And I kind of got a little more optimistic. I'm like, holy shit. And then I meet some of them. And then I was in a plane flying around the Alaska range in April of 2023, and I get a text on my phone, because you can get texts on airplanes in the Alaska range now. Seems weird. And it's from Matt Cornell, and it's a selfie on the top of Mount Huntington, where he was at that time. And this is completely crazy. And then I came in here one day, and I was talking with Jack, and I was talking with Bronte, and I mentioned like this idea of like a lack of connection with history, and they set me straight. And they know all of the things. They somehow watch some of these old climbing videos, interested in storytelling and the communication of the stories, and that's kind of what got me to say yes to go give a talk at the Wyoming Ice Fest. And anything now, I'm just going to say yes to stuff like this, because I realized that after having disappeared into a world of like artificial training inside gyms and shit, that, you know, climbers are my people. And climbing is where I come from, it's what made me, and there's a spoken shorthand. Like if we talk about like, yeah, that pitch, you know, da-da-da-da, I don't have to explain it, because it's not some dude who's only been lifting weights this entire time. And then earlier this winter, I thought, okay, this is the year. I had a really strong feeling that the reality bath was going to get repeated this winter. I don't know why, but I also had money, a bet against myself, so I won and lost, about who it was going to be. And then somebody out of the blue, I get I can't even remember how it happened. It's a direct message, or it was something on Signal or text, and it happened. And it happened in really good style. And it's really impressive to me that, well, that's how I think things should be done. There have been routes done in the past. First ascent's done in good style, where the second ascent was done in less good style. Or a route like when the Harlan route got done on the north face of the Eiger with German team and Leighton Core, Dougal Haston, John Harlan. And that was like the logical progression after that would have been to do that route in Alpine style, because they fixed some ropes. But what happened after that was a Japanese route with over 500 bolts drilled, ropes fixed all over the face. So good style doesn't always beget good style. In this case it did, and I'm super impressed and thankful that it did. And I think the more that we communicate about good style, doing things in a way that gives the mountain a chance, gives the routes a chance, demands the most of us, less on the gear, I think it's what inspires me. And I'm pretty stoked about younger generation of climbers and generations right now, and I'm pretty stoked to be here with Balin.
Thank you.
We prepared a little show with some images, some pictures. Obviously, because of the nature of this particular route, there's not an exhaustive documentation, either back then or now. I had a question I had to look up on the internet, like how long is a generation? And they say on average, it's like 20 years. So we got a couple of generations between us. And it was 37 years ago that the route first got done, which to me seems like a long time.
I think it is a long time.
And by that I mean, like, if it's, and so either it's, so that means something's wrong with the route, right? Because if it's really good, and it's something that people want to repeat and aspire to, they want to go and have that experience, well, let it get repeated the following year, maybe that same year, maybe 2 years, 3 years, something like that. Every 3 of my 5 new routes in the Alps all got repeated within 2 or 3 years. And, one of them not in such great style, but sure. But 37 years seems like a long time. I just was like, yeah, I mean, people drive by it all the time. Maybe it just doesn't, they drive by and there's like maybe it just never formed again. There was some guys that did that route to the right of Reality Bath. And I can't remember, is it 2007 maybe? I don't remember.
Swiss guys. Right?
Swiss guys, yeah.
Dread Circus?
Yes. Apparently, they thought that the Reality Bath was too dangerous, so they would just go like 100 feet to the right, or 200, or 100 yards, or 200 yards. I don't know where it is. I'd completely forgotten about that ascent. They probably didn't, but anyway, to have it done this year, and also having done Simulsolid Slipstream within the same year-ish, same 12-month periods,
Sort of.
a few months,
Almost.
whatever, and some other stuff. And then the fact that, when I saw Balin's post about repeating the Reality Bath, and the music behind it was a track called Slow Pulse Boy by a band called, and also The Trees, which is the track that I used to open every one of my single slideshows, every single one of my slideshows, starting in 1984 pretty much. It's like, all right, we gotta sit down and talk about this stuff. Because how does anybody know about the 80s in a way that includes the roots, the music, climbing with a headband or not? There's photos, so I know it's been done. Anyway, you're 22 years old.
23.
23.
Yeah. Month ago.
Okay. Well, this whole thing, the whole first part of the show is based on the fact that at one point you were 22 and you had a pretty good climbing year when you were 22. We'll put it that way. And so I thought I would introduce myself, we would introduce ourselves with some ideas about what it's like to go climbing when you're 22 years old. And a little housekeeping first. Thank you, Bernie and OT, Jack Bronte, for bringing us in and allowing us to do this here. I think we'd have a pretty unique opportunity to, that I just realized there are some follow-on episodes of this similar past meets future situation. But and thank everyone for coming out. I mean, it just because this is just, I don't know, it just makes me very fucking excited. Flaming Ice Tool has been my sort of personal logo since 85 or 86. And I've been calling myself a Keep Solitaire at that time, which I thought was the team of one because I was soloing a lot. And we'll just read some of the hyperbole. This I kind of pulled from Climbing Magazine because I thought it was really funny that somebody said that the Reality Bath is like the most infamous waterfall route in, because I talked a lot of shit about it after Randy and I did it. And then it got done. So more shit should be talked about this. Albie Soul said it was so dangerous as to be of little value except to those suicidally inclined. And I said I resembled that remark at that time. Jojo said it was undoubtedly the most dangerous ice route in the range. Maybe, maybe not. But Gimme Shelter, in it when it was originally done, Kevin Doyle and Tim Friesen, it was pretty fucking dangerous. Slipstream has always been dangerous. Guy that I did a little climb with, got killed there some years ago. Stuff falls down, but you're sensitized to it. Maybe it won't while you're there, or maybe it will. I thought it was interesting that Randy and I, when we first saw it, I've been climbing under and on Seracs on routes prior to that. Both he and I didn't think it looked that bad until we were at the bottom of the sixth pitch, or I was up on the sixth pitch on our first attempt, and it was proven to be that bad. But I didn't think Slipstream was. So when I was 22, I took my first trip to the Alps. I went to the Eiger with John Krakauer, who was one of my first climbing mentors. We wanted it like that. We got it like that. Wettest September since 1864. That was in 1984. And yeah, we waited for 3 weeks and we did not get very far. No, most these pitches right here normally are rock climbing. I consoled myself by, I gotta get the laser pointer out, but you can just, this route on the gold line there is a route that was done by Dougal Hafton and Ole Estrup in sometime before I did it. But I walked across all of these glaciers and up through that ice fall and everything without a rope. Had to do the Jesus move a few times, my feet punched through. John and I eventually tried the Eiger, failed on the Eiger, and I got on a train, went down to Chamonix. Well, the first route I did, I don't have a picture of, it's insignificant. Anyway, the second route is this, the Gabarou Albinoni, which you can't really see the laser pointer on the screen, but it's there. It's obvious sort of waterfall route that splits those rocks. And I thought that Chamonix was pretty cool. The super couloir, splitting the pillars, Jefferson City pillar on the right of Mont Blanc to Takula thing on the left, 3 points pillar maybe. Anyway, there's a frozen waterfall route that goes up there, first climbed in 1975 by Jean-Marc Levin and somebody. And I was in the climbing shop in Chamonix, and Christophe Profi, who I'd met on the north face of the Eiger, he asked me what I'd done, and he said, "Oh, you would like the super couloir, you should go do that." So I thought, well, he knows some shit. And so I went and did that. This beautiful ice line right here came down. The next thing was the Swiss route on Lake Court, which is route number 8. My friend Alex Buis makes these beautiful topo posters that you can download a wallpaper from the internet if you ever want to go someplace and you want to know what routes are there. And then the next thing that I did was the north face of the Grand Charmeuse, and this is what it looks like in the summertime. And a little bit icier conditions there. And this is November 1st, 1984, the day before my 23rd birthday. And it was the best ice season I have, well, I'd never seen in the Alps at that point because I'd never been before. And it's the best ice season I've ever seen since, and spent a decent amount of time there. There's that looking up at the ice on that face, and if people remember White Koflax and when you used to wear your gaiters on the outside of your pants, and those straps, this weird bondage arrangement for crampons. Bit different. Anyway, first story in Kiss or Kill is all about this climb, which, if anybody read and remembers, this is what sent me home after this route is finishes on some really hard ice climbing right in there. I'd asked my friend Julian Mills, who was an expat Brit living in Chamonix at the time. I said, well, so when you get to the top of the Charmeuse, how do you get down? And he said, well, you get to the ridge and you just look over and there will be a couloir there. And you just go down it. And that will take you down the west face. So a storm that had been predicted to come the next day arrived 24 hours early. I was at the top of this mountain with no visibility and had almost fallen off already, so I'm kind of interested in getting down. And I got to the ridge crest here, looked over, saw a couloir, and went down. What I needed to do was to climb up to that point right there. So, thank you, Alex. One more. I looked over the, doesn't work. So I looked over the ridge right here, into this couloir, and descended the east face, which is about 2,800 vertical feet. That purple line was climbed as an ice route finally in 1996 by Patrick Gabarou. So I made the first descent. And I think he graded it water ice 4 plus. I had a 50-meter piece of 7mm rope, 3 or 4 wired nuts, an ice screw, a cam, and a bunch of slings. The combination of down climbing and stuff managed to somehow get down this face. found my way over to the Envers hut, which is here, and then followed the painted signs to the ladders and this and that. I was down on the Mer de Glace at some point, still whited out, and I realized, like, okay, there's cliffs along the side, and I'll just shout until the echo stops, and that'll mean the cliff band is done, and that's where the ladder goes up to the train station, which isn't running because it's November, but I'll be able to walk down from there. And I did, and I got down. I was a day late getting back to town, so I went by the gendarmerie to tell them that I was not dead. And then they said, "What will you do next?" And I said, "I will go home now." And that was 22. Bailey.
When I was 22. A little different. This is, I guess, more when I was closer to 23. Not including everything, obviously, like getting the flu on Denali. But this is, I think, like a day before, or 2 days before Thanksgiving, on the Ragni route on Zoratore with Ethan Berkland and Chris Lavotsky. This is Ethan doing a mix of like kind of aiding off of screws, tools, and pickets up the Rhine, like 2 pitches below the summit. And it's kind of funny, the day after this, we had to do the 30-mile walk out back to town on Thanksgiving. We like ran totally, or Chris and I didn't bring nearly enough food, so we ran out. Ethan brought some extra, so we didn't totally starve, but definitely the hungriest we ever were on Thanksgiving. And then this is Ethan leading at the Chalkstone pitch on Sarah Aguha Stanhart, doing exocet. And then this is the sunset at La Breccia on Cerro Chalten when I sold it towards the end of my trip. So this was, I think, 6 days, or this photo was exactly a week before Reality Bath, but I summited the next day. This is higher on the Californiana, trailing a rope on one of the 5.9 pitches, something like that.
That route got done in like 1971 first or something? Or it could be the 60s, huh?
It was a long time ago.
Anybody know their history in here? Because clearly we don't.
5 or 67.
I mean, it was like, I think
It's
the
the
third
Viva
set
Los
of the peak.
Funhogs route.
Pardon?
It's the Viva Los Funhogs route.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fun, yeah.
Oh.
I just remember those weird goggles that maybe Doug Tompkins had in the photo or something.
And then this is last fall, November of 2023. A little before, obviously. That's Snow Dome, Slipstream. You can kind of see it a little bit. It's not there.
Way to make it not look steep.
I know, right? I guess that was probably the first real climb I did under a Serac. That's notable.
But as you can see here, at least I don't think this rack looks that mean
Directly over the rope, though it does get a little worse the further left you go out of the shot.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure that over where, what's Barry's route called? Death from Above or something like that.
Borderline.
Yeah, Borderline. There we go. Same thing. Yeah. What do you know? All right. So now we'll go back in time. So, John Bouchard, who's driving the van, or pretending to drive the van, had this company called Wild Things at the time, which like too soon, and he basically put his money where his mouth was. He was, he was willing to actually sponsor climbers. He was like one of the first people in the U.S. to actually pay guys to go climbing. Randy and I were earning $125 a week. Woo! Yeah.
Pretty good, mate.
Until it ran out, and then that's a different story. I needed to put this picture up, A, to show how fucking young everyone is. Jimmy Surratt on the left, Scott Franklin, myself, and Randy Ratcliffe. Maybe now the only photos you see of Randy are of the packs that he makes. He doesn't want his photo out there. I think this is the only picture I have of Randy not in climbing clothes. At the time, he was an incredibly good climber, but you wouldn't know it because he never talked about it. And even if you asked him, you might not learn what he had done. Some of the things were soloing basically all the hard routes at Lake Willoughby. We included the Promenade, Last Gentleman, had a really good season in the Alps. 86 or 87, I can't remember exactly which year, where he did a number of classics, soloed the South Ridge of the Aiguille Noire, which is a pretty serious undertaking. And was working at Wild Things. He's an incredible artist. And so obviously, Jimmy Surratt and Scott Franklin, they're the rock climbing team. And then we were, the Alpine climbing team, the ice climbing team, something. And John bought this van, which we were going to live in and drive around. And van life was a little different back then. A little bit more of a smaller scale operation. You needed to be real good friends with each other. Rear wheel drive.
Wait, were you all four in the van?
No.
Okay.
Oh no, the rock climbers had more sense than to be involved. Randy and I, so we start off on tour, whatever, January of '88. We drive from North Conway, New Hampshire, up to someplace in Quebec. We bivouac in the back of the van on the edge in a parking lot next to the St. Lawrence Seaway. It's minus 35 degrees and basically 100% humidity. So it was foggy outside. It was ice fog. You'd just get on your clothes and stick. And that's maybe the coldest I've ever been. It was pretty fucking horrible. We went to the tourist office. We drove to a little town called Malbaie. We went to the tourist office, and I said in the French that I didn't know how to speak, "I'm looking for a large waterfall." Through some, English, French, Franglish, they got us on the road out to where you would access the Palm d'Or. We drive to the road where the gate is. The last house on the road is the guy that you pay to take you on the snowmobile. But the snowmobile's broken. So Randy and I skied from the end of the road, I think it's 21 miles, to get to the route. Took longer than we thought. We didn't have enough food. There was a cabin at the bottom. We may have, no, the window was already broken. We got in, we found some macaroni, and that mixed with water is awesome. We climbed the Palm d'Or the next day, slept again. Next night, skied out, got in the van, drove all the way to Canmore. In that van. Studded tires are illegal in Canada. Just saying. We did a bunch of routes. Classics. I've been there a couple times before. We saw this thing. And we thought, holy shit. I bet that's never been climbed. So we went in there to try it. And got up to the break in the screens there with nothing bad happening. Put the rope on there. I climbed that pitch. Partway up that pitch, I guess it was, we were talking before, I didn't even make it to the belay. I put in one screw, put in another screw. This is when the Seracs calved. And it's basically the only part, maybe I'll just say, if you were any lower than that on the route, you wouldn't survive. All of it went over our heads. Randy lowered me back to the belay. We sat in the cave for a long time, trying to convince you, it's over. The stuff's already fallen. Now it's totally safe. We should go. No. No, you're fucking crazy. Who said what? Who knows? I don't know if I was unwilling or Randy was unwilling, or we did this and we both decided to leave. So we pulled the ropes, left those 2 screws, went away, and during the next 3 weeks the Chinook blew, which is a warm wind, and everything fell down. If anybody remembers the '88 Olympics, they had to cancel the ski jumping a bunch of days because the wind was blowing so hard. We did some other routes, nothing of significance until whatever it started. Basically our last week of our trip, it got cold again, and we were in the Rampart Creek Hostel, and things seemed solid, and we thought, okay, well, we should go climbing. So the first day, the Monday, we simul-soloed Polar Circus, and I was carrying a VHS camera that John had given us. If anybody's seen that old Adrenaline Cocktail video, that's where all that shit came from. It was actual, like, gigantic VHS tapes in a thing that we somehow had. Somewhere on the, like, at the little ledge, this is the top, the last 2 pictures of it on that ledge right there, I panned to film Randy, and the battery hit the rock and came off the camera and it disappeared forever. And so we didn't have any video of the last pitch, but I swear he did it. We rappelled down from that, took a rest day, then went on Wednesday to Slipstream. So this is how you make it look steeper. I don't know, that I think in the guidebook at the time it said something like "stay right to avoid icefall," some shit like that. And I don't know what that would mean, unless the ice was over here, falling down a completely different route, and then you would be safe here. Randy and I decided we were going to go as fast as possible. We didn't take a rope. I had a 4-pound paraglider, 4.5-pound paraglider in my pack. I was just going to fly down. He had a 50-meter piece of 9/16-inch webbing that he was going to use to rappel on. Fucking 80s. And obviously, no one really cares if they're coming home, apparently. So we crossed the Birch Run down here, which is when I started the stopwatch. And this is the one thing I'm still pretty damn proud of, actually. The speed record, I know that Balin simul-soloed it, but I also know that he didn't post his time, so that means they didn't break the record. Most teams in the '88 were taking like 12 hours. Jay Smith and Craig Reason did it in 5, sometime '86 maybe, and so I stopped my watch over the top of the Serac in 2 hours and 4 minutes, and Randy came up at 3 hours and 20 minutes. The wind was blowing off the ice cap really hard, which means it's blowing from behind, which is not great for launching a paraglider in the opposite direction. Paragliders were not good enough at the time to, pop facing the wind, turn out of the wind, and fly away. The shit that can be done with a paraglider now is not. This was basically 2 years after the whole movement started. So I waited. And then Randy showed up, and then we walked unroped across the ice cap over to the place that you go down, which is off to the left. And it's a cool route. I mean, it's 900 meters high. I mean, it's like an Alpine route. It's not hard. 4 plus, maybe. I don't know.
I thought it was pretty solid 4 plus.
Yeah, I thought it was.
Well, so I would sew up, but then I would wait for Ethan.
Yeah.
And then on the crux pitch, he kind of got up to me. He's like, I really wish we took the rope out for that pitch.
Randy might have been thinking the same thing at some point, but I didn't wait. Because I was fulfilling my own imperative, I guess. so that happened Wednesday. We took Thursday off, and then Friday we went back to the reality bath. During the 3 weeks of Chinook, a lot of stuff had fallen down. Like this snow slope below the route was just frozen chunks of ice and snow, and it just looked like bombs had fallen everywhere. But now it's hard freeze, and so I think, this is pretty fucking safe. So we went for it. Soloed the first 4 pitches, which up to the big break, or 5 pitches, what we called it. The break below our 6th pitch, and since I had led most of it before, I offered it to Randy, who led that pitch, clipped the 2 screws that I had left, ran out a rope, put in a hanging belay, because, at the time ropes were, when I got my first 50-meter rope, that was a 10-meter upgrade from 40. 50 was awesome. What you could do with a 50-meter rope. Anyway, so, and it turned out, our system was basically, we had this skinny little 8 or 9 mil rope. We did not have another rope with us. The point was the leader would climb as fast as, put in pro if you want, whatever, it may help, may not. Who knows what will happen with this rope, because it is 1988. And then the point of having the rope was so the second could follow as fast as possible. So second was following with tension most of the time. Like the other guy's just like yarding on the rope so that we could be not on this thing for any longer than we had to be. I'm reminded, looking at, these are the best ice tools in the world at the time. It's pretty bad. It's interesting how bad those ice tools, and like not a curb shaft in sight. We had
Mittens too.
Pardon?
Mittens.
Mittens, because there's these things that cut off the circulation to your hand. It's super weird. You hang on them. Anyway, and we had put like foam in the backs of the mittens because you're like destroying. You'd have like a good month-long trip in the Canadian Rockies and do 15, 20 routes without padding in the mittens in those days. Like, you just need to have someone else drive home, is essentially it. It's just pretty fucking cool to be that far out there doing this thing. And especially on this, this is totally safe for me. And during our first attempt, the Seracs fell, we made our decision to go down. We get back to the van, there's a note written by a guy called Jeff Creighton that's under the windshield. And they were on the parkway, they'd seen the van parked, they stopped, got their binoculars out, saw us on the route, saw the Seracs fall, waited, figuring we were dead, saw us eventually come to our senses and start rappelling down, and so he put a note on the van. It's like, we thought you guys were dead. Come to my place at Canmore for a Beat the Reaper celebration. And I remember this night of just being pretty hammered, and at some point jumping up and down the living room, everybody shouting "Beat the Reaper" in unison. So we had figured that with all the debris that was down below the route, that this would be like totally safe up here. And I don't think it was. Yeah. What? We realized that this section on the right of the Serac there is like totally overhanging, so the direct finish out the Serac, which was not going to happen. We moved, traversed a bit over to the right where it was less overhanging and obviously a whole lot safer, and tried to get out that way. climbed up right under the sacks, put a belay in, and Randy's lead again, unfortunately. And he made a few moves, like it was pretty, like that ice has been there for a while. It's dense and hard and brittle and fucked. And every time he swung his tool, the ice that I was standing on would shake. And at one point, if I recall correctly, he swung his tool 28 times to get a placement. And that's like, you know, and pretty soon the tool's like inside this giant crater. And he just said, man, this is really, really fucking bad. And I don't think we can get out this way. And I said, well, based on what I'm feeling through my feet and hearing, I think we probably need to try and exit off to the right. So we traversed across under the Seracs. I found about a 5'7", I can't remember if it was left facing or right, but it was a little corner through the rocks to the right edge of the Serac, get on the snow slope, went up to the, not quite the summit, but the place that we could get over the ridge to go down the west face. And I mean, once we were above the Serac, holy shit, everything got a little bit lighter, a little bit brighter, a little bit, we're probably not going to die. And then it takes about an hour for, you know, like once all of the nerves are gone, you know, kind of settled, that's when you start drunk dialing to your friends. But it's 88, so you can't call anybody. Anyway, the amount of hubris that came back during the descent it still alarms me to this day. But we got down. At that time, the grading system in Canada for ice routes was a combined grade where the engagement and the technical difficulty were combined. So there was a single Roman numeral. The hardest thing that had been done was a Roman numeral 6+, which would be Riptide. Even Kevin and Tim, I think they graded Gimme Shelter just a straight 6. And so I was like, fuck it, we're going to call this 7. Because that was like some of the hardest ice climbing that Randy and I had done was like mushrooms sort of sticking out like this and overhanging. And obviously the danger. So the technical difficulty, Riptide's harder, Gimme Shelter's harder, and this is more dangerous. So you have to be suicidally inclined to be into it, or wanting to make some kind of a statement that was going to last for 37 fucking years, which is, I think, what we did. And Randy and I got down. We spent the night in the Rampart Creek Hostel, packed a van, in one straight shot drove to Smith Rocks because Scott Franklin was there on tour, and we had to give the van to him, which we had drag started it once, so I was a little bit suspicious about the transmission ever working properly again. Because at minus 42 it wouldn't start and we couldn't push it, and the place where it was parked at that time below the weeping wall isn't steep enough to get it rolling in neutral. So somebody suggested that they get their pickup truck and we tie a rope to it and you just drag it until, you know, it's moving fast enough, and you could pop the clutch or it's an automatic transmission, so that would just mean you shift it out of neutral into drive. So we did that, and it was rolling in neutral just fine, and then I was like, well, I'm going fast enough, popped it into drive, 30 feet of skid mark, loud noise, and the car's running and rolling. We dropped it off with Scott. He did have to have the transmission replaced, happily under warranty. Who knows what could have possibly happened? And he finished out his tour. That was the point in time where he did a route called Scarface, which was going to be too easy. So he asked Randy and I to go up and remove a flake off of this route. Untold history, maybe. He had put an M80 under the flake already, a little eighth of a stick of dynamite to try and blow it off, because he's just like, man, 13D, it's not going to be hard enough. It's not going to be a statement. So he's like, you guys are Alpine climbers. If you go up there with your ice tools and you pry that off, it'll be fine. You're alpine climbers. No one's going to give a fuck. If I do it, I'll just be canceled if it was 2020. So Randy and I did a few routes in our mountain boots in Smith Rocks. That was cool. And then we did go up. We pried this flake off. And Scarface, I think, became 14A at that point. I don't know. That's some history I'm not familiar with. But I kind of think if you're comfortizing holds to make a route easier, that's bullshit. If you're removing holds entirely to make it harder, fuck yeah. Anyway, then Randy and I got on a plane. I went home to having been fired from Wild Things for some transgressions I committed while in the Canadian Rockies, and that was the reality path. So, I thought we had a pretty good 5 days, week. The Monday, the Wednesday, the Friday of the, or a couple of really good days leading to the reality path, then the reality path. And then Balin had a pretty fucking cool week beforehand too.
So I soloed Fitzroy on, I think, the 3rd of January, and then got back really early that morning, and then had one day in Chalten, flew back to Calgary, which I left my car in Calgary because I was gonna climb there before Patagonia and after, but ended up spending too much time in the valley prior, so I was figuring it was going to be perfect conditions when I get back. So I get back to Calgary, super tired. I'm like, I don't really want to go climbing, but I guess I'm here. I crashed at my friend Adam's place, and I think he had work, so I didn't really have a partner. Drove all the way down the parkway, all the way to Curtin Call, which is a 3-hour drive from Canmore. Just kind of looking at shit. I'm like, I don't really know what to do. And then I heard VR was in good shape, which this is taken on the approach to VR Murchison. I ended up doing that, but my daddy's a psycho. And then on the way back to the car, you get a really good view of White Pyramid and the reality bath. I think I posted this photo on my Instagram as kind of like a joke, and then John Juggenheimer replied. He's like, if you don't have a partner for that, you should let me know, because I'll find you a partner. I'm like, I didn't really think about doing it, but if he thinks it's in. And then I look closely, and I'm like, all the smears are connected, so I have to try it. So then the next day, not as good weather as the previous day. I didn't have skis, so the approach ended up taking 4 hours of post-hauling. Super sick. Get a little closer, clears up a little bit. You can kind of see there's quite a bit of spin drift coming down. And right under the base. I mean, I didn't see any giant debris at the bottom, so seemed like a good idea.
I mean, you're already at it only gets safer the closer to the wall you go at this point.
Cool. This is, I don't know, halfway up the route. I was definitely feeling the past week in my legs pretty tired. Honestly, I wasn't sure if the vertical ice or the water ice too was worse, because my calves were just so destroyed. And then the spin drift kind of got worse, and I even triggered a few slides on some of the ledges in between, but I was above it at that point.
But you got the Reco system in your jacket.
Oh yeah.
So they find the jacket.
Exactly. And then this is right after the crux pitch. And that was kind of like the one question mark. But after that, I was like, oh, it's in the bag. You know, what's going to happen now? And then you kind of see the Seracs. I got pretty psyched. Kind of ran up the last 2 pitches. And I didn't notice taking this photo at the time, but the photo Mark had of Randy, kind of on that slope right there, is like almost the same photo.
Yeah.
And as you can tell, the Serac doesn't look quite as scary as when Mark was on it. There's no giant teetering blocks. But there was a lot of spin drift. I thought about climbing the Serac, but they didn't, and I was tired, so I ended up trying it out.
I mean, you think about it, it's like, all right, if this ice is on the front of this Serac, where did it start as snow, and how long ago? And yeah, it's not. I know that when Francois Damilano repeated Gimme Shelter, they did the direct finish to the Serac.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what condition it was in. Obviously climbable. We didn't think that
Well, I know, like,
we didn't think it was climbable for us.
like Forefather on Snowdome,
Mhm.
I think they tried to climb the Serac, but they described it as the ice was exploding.
Yes.
So then
That's
they
it.
bailed.
That's
And then
it.
I think on
Not a bad
I didn't think on Polarity they didn't do the Serac either. I think Uli did like a pitch of it
Uh-huh.
and then bailed.
Okay.
So
Yeah. And so you got down in 6 rappels? 4 rappels?
I think 6. I can't really remember. Something like that. And then sunset. I was pretty hyped. Bit quicker on the way out. Drove way too fast back to Canmore to Georgetown. Got a bunch of food and kind of threw a little post on my story, and I was a little surprised how it blew up. It did after like 20 minutes.
Is that how long it took?
It wasn't long.
Wow. So I do want to say something about Randy, who made these incredible woodblock prints back in the day. He's not making art. I know he's been convinced a few times in the last maybe 10, 15 years to do some commissions for people, but I don't know, the vice grips on the femur bone ice tools is pretty fucking good. You'd think that that's obviously a very happy individual. Makes art like this, or depicts his friends with art like this. I mean, he did do a fucking badass version of the flaming ice tool, though. And he is, you know, he's making packs. He still makes. Randy, raise your prices, by the way. He made, I don't know, the best packs that Scott and I used during our partnership. And they are still available today. He's making them. And I am fortunate to live with a lot of his art. And I don't know, I have enormous respect for him. We had a particularly unique partnership in that we could go for 3 days straight without talking and then talk for 24 hours straight. And always seemed to be like in tune enough that we didn't really need to talk much. Like, are we going back to that route? Yeah, we're going back to that route. That's all need to be said. And I got on that trip, got invited to on a fork in the road that took me to Nanga Parbat and then Everest. That later in '88 with Barry Blanchard and Kevin Doyle and Ward Robinson, and Randy and I didn't ever climb again together after that season. So I'm glad it was such a good fucking season. Once again, Bernie, OT, everybody here at Beringia, thank you for hosting us. And there's some writing. I hope that Balin will write something, even, beyond a social media post about.
I wrote a little bit.
I saw screenshots of it. Because these things, I think they need to be documented. Part of telling the story is telling the story. And maybe the written word reaches more people than a spoken thing like this, although there's, how many people are watching on that live stream, right?
Like 50.
Nice. So we're reaching a few people, 100 people, something total. And yeah, I think the telling of the stories is pretty important. And because otherwise they go away. And if I just shut this, and it goes away. Perfect. So I hope you will write a little something more, maybe. So I'm making this new zine. I have one will come out sometime in the next couple of months. And the second version of it, I've got all the pieces imported to it, working on the layout, and it's all going to be climbing related. Bunch of stuff of mine that was in print, but never, like maybe in a climbing magazine that doesn't exist anymore, or it exists in name only. And so maybe you have to include some guest authors in said zine when it's time. Perfect. Bravo.
Well, thank you. You too.
Now you're working.
Shoveling snow.
My first job at Wild Things was clearing a field in the forest. John Bouchard owned a cabin at the base of Whitehorse, and I think 6 or 7 acres. And and it's like thick New England forest. And he's like, I want to make a landing zone for the paragliders, for people who fly off Whitehorse, and you can land at what was later called the Scareport. And so my first job was cutting down trees with Wild Things. That's how climbing sponsorship starts. At one point I got 2 chainsaws stuck at the same time. That's bullshit. Anyway. You'll be around here this winter.
Yep. About 2 more months?
2 more months?
Yeah.
Anything on your radar here still, or?
Skiing?
I heard G1's fat right now.
We did talk about that route on Mount Bradley.
Thinking about it. It'd be cool.
It would be cool.
There's kind of some other things in the East Alaska Range that a little more psyched on.
Yeah.
Especially since it kind of goes there.
A lot of people go to that other part, it seems.
Yeah.
Cool. Bigger plans? Like to, are there things in the greater ranges, I guess, that
kind of trying looking at a trip to Pakistan, a couple years, but
okay.
We'll see how that pans out.
Yeah.
We're actually looking at doing a decoration this spring.
Okay.
So another Mark Twight route. Sweet.
Straighten out the third rock band.
Yeah, that hasn't been repeated, has it?
No. I know that when Andy Parkin went up tried to solo it, he tried to get through the third rock band where there is an obvious, in the perfect season there would be ice through that feature, and I think the same thing happened. That went down from there or had to go around because it wasn't climbable, and Andy's fucking stuck, so must have been not in. That'd be a good one. It'd be quick.
Yeah, hopefully.
I mean, and you know that if you were there by yourself, let's say, I would not recommend the west ridge of the descent route.
Yeah, no, that's, yeah, it seems like you're gonna take a couple crevasse falls, for sure.
Scott did. I remember one where all I saw after he disappeared was like the ski pole waving, "I'm okay." But, I thought it might be interesting if somebody had a question about anything. Yes.
Can you describe like your average rest days, like what you did during those times?
That week where I was talking about resting?
Yeah.
I think Randy and I were the only two people in the Rampart Creek. Actually, John Popowich was there. I have some Super 8 film being digitized right now. Obviously, it wasn't ready for this evening. I have no idea what's on this spool of film. John Popowich was there, and he shot it, and he sent it to me a while ago, and I lost it and then didn't want to say that to him. Then I found it. It was in a box in an office. Anyway, we read books. We probably listened to cassette tapes on repeat. Split firewood, kept the wood stove going, and we're probably on out like. This was not the era of active recovery, let's say, which would have been smarter to go do something. But mostly, and I don't know that anything, like we took rest days because of the, we were like physically destroyed. I think because we were more mentally, like, I need to recover enough to get hungry to go do something else because I don't have it, like it's gone. Hence the total sloth-like nature of a rest day. And eating as much as possible because we would never really carry enough food on any of these routes. Or, I guess I didn't. I think Randy probably took care of himself better than I did most days. Come on, nobody wants to say some crazy thing like, were you really suicidal?
What food would you bring?
Pardon?
What food would you bring? Like one Snickers bar?
God, 1988? I don't, let's see. I got cured. So power bars had been invented at that time. There were two flavors, malt nut and chocolate. But those you couldn't take into the mountains with you in the winter because they froze solid. And they were inedible unless you had the sense to put them inside the insulated sleeve of your water bottle that you had filled with hot liquid. Yeah. I was kind of there was a period where I was into peanut butter and honey sandwiches also. Some little square pieces of bread that in France they call pain d'épices, which is like spicy bread. It's not really, it's more gingery. Yeah. Maybe a tube of sweetened condensed milk. The first sports gel. What did you take that day? Like, what do you eat when you go out for big games?
I had some fig bars. I brought cookies. Like, it was the cheapest thing I could find. I'm bringing up.
It's shocking how expensive the science diet is.
Yeah.
I'm like, wait, a goo? Like, $2 for 100 calories? Swear to God, a tube of sweetened condensed milk is, if they made tubes here, that's more of a European thing. Here it's in cans, it's a bit messy because you got to finish what you start in one sitting and throw it in the recycling. Fig bars and cookies, that's pretty good.
It's all right.
Okay, sir, 9/16 did you bring?
What?
nuts.
Did you take hardware up on it? Or just a kit to make threads?
Yeah, I was thinking of taking some nuts, but I think I just took like 2 screws, 2 ropes.
Nice.
Or
Two.
tagline and a rope. Tagline and 1/2 rope. Yeah.
Nice. So you could make 6 rappels of whatever.
Yeah, just naked threads.
Yeah. I was wondering, I'm like, 6 rappels, you must have long ropes. Because I feel like for some reason,
65-minute ropes.
I mean, yeah. Spare tool or?
Nope.
Bailey, you use pound-in screws, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I use some snars. Is that what you guys have, or do you have?
We had a mix of them. I mean, Jeff, much respect, but the Snard was one of the stupidest ice creams ever. Because it's like, man, I'm already pumped out of my fucking mind, and I am now going to hammer, turn the tool around, and get more pumped trying to put a piece of gear in. And then my partner's going to totally hate me as he tries to remove. The titanium ones were not better because they had more surface area. And there was a twist-in screw called the Rat, was the first aluminum screw. It had like a steel bit welded on the front to cut, and then a big fat alloy tube. Not taking into consideration that the friction coefficient of aluminum is quite different than steel. So those screws were super hard to put in, but they had a nice little ratcheting wrench situation built into them. Jeff, seriously.
What's your favorite piece of gear?
Right now, in this moment.
Sure.
I mean, if we're talking about my favorite piece of climbing gear, it's a set of picks that Charlie from Beartooth Alpine made for me that have, one of them has engraved on it, soft spoken. The other one has the phrase, says, changes nothing. Which is a lyric from the Skinny Puppy song. Apparently Charlie and I, and Pete, believe this is one of Skinny Puppy's greatest songs. Soft spoken, changes nothing. There's also a skull with a mohawk on one, and then the double-fisted flipping people off. Those picks are in a set of tools that were homemade by a kid named Connor McCrillis. And so whenever I go out ice climbing now, those are the tools that I use. I kind of like them.
Have you swung those picks?
Yes. Oh, yes. And it got me thinking. I was trying to think the total number of tools or picks that Randy and I broke on that trip. It wasn't, I think it was 8 tools total, 7 picks, 1 shaft. We broke the head off of a Simone Chacal. But that was, and then I go, yeah, it's not a record because Barry and I broke 13 picks in 2 weeks, sometime in the early 90s, like the very first Gravel Evolution picks were not yet quite dialed in. And on all of these in '88, I was carrying 2 spare tools when I was solo. Randy would carry 1, and it was a Forrest Malner, and it had like a little piece of 3mm cord on it, but no sling. And there was a day when he was on the lower Weeping Wall and soloing, and broke 1 pick on his main ice tool, pulled out the Malner, kept climbing, broke the other pick on the main tool, so he was hanging. Water ice force is not really hanging, you know, had some weight on his feet, but he's hanging there, and he shouts down, he's like, I'm like, well, I can't really throw it to him, you know, like, trying to throw an ice tool to somebody doesn't really work, so I climbed up and handed him one of mine, and we got down, and that was when I think we decided that the gear was not quite yet up to snuff for what we were trying to do, and it does take a lot of the gear development especially in that era, it happened when harder routes were getting done, people were misusing the product, and then that just led to new products being made.
That was actually my first tool I climbed on.
No
A
kidding.
ball mill,
Whoa! I want to say it's like a 37 centimeter shaft or
Yeah,
something.
they're so
Like-
short.
Do you have a favorite book, or is there a book that inspired you? It doesn't have to be climbing related.
Ooh, an inspiring book. I would have to. There's two. They're sort of related. I would have to say the book that most influenced my climbing career was Solo Faces by James Salter, which is basically a fictionalized version of Gary Hemming's journey in the Alps, when he basically was the expat beatnik American, got involved on the big rescue with Des Maisons on the west face of the Drew when 2 Germans got trapped up there, and there was this whole weird scene. And part of the reason that book is so good is Salter's he was an amazing writer. Anything written by him is incredible. Barry Blanchard described it later as, if people think that Hemingway used few words, Salter uses fewer. And Barry's description was he out-Hemingwayed Hemingway. And then the next book is Calculated Risk by Dougal Haston, which I think is the greatest climbing novel ever written. And the manuscript was delivered. The opening chapter talks about the protagonist, John, nearly dying in an avalanche on the north face of the Riondà above Les Sens in Switzerland, and which is where Dougal was the director of the International Mountaineering School in Les Sens at the time. He delivered the manuscript the next day, went and skied the north face of the Riondà and got killed in an avalanche. So the book basically got published without any editing because the publisher decided like it would be rude, to not give him a chance to rewrite. If you're going to change something, it should be the author who changes it. And it's fucking such a good book. There are copies of it. It went out of print for a while. It's in print again. You can find used copies. You can find new paperbacks. Calculated Risk is top for sure.
Balin, what ice tools did you use on this route?
The second generation Nomex, obviously. Well, yeah, so the old ones, the headboard will eventually wobble off. So my dad put another bolt in them. And the second grips I bashed off years ago. So there's aftermarket grips on them. So
Since you knew the history of Mark's ascent, do you think it would have been cool to do it in his style with the same equipment and go for it in that?
I don't think it'd be as fun.
Respect
Did
his.
you wear a helmet? Which one?
I shouldn't, but I thought about not wearing a helmet. But since it was going to be spindrifty, a hood these days with no helmet is kind of useless. This like goes over your eyes. So I passed.
I did ask him whether he was headband or helmet, and exact answer. Yeah, I was not really into the helmet at that time, and I got very into helmets later because it meant you could, swing the tool, ice breaks, you could point your helmet at it, and it would just make a loud noise and not really hurt that bad. And
Isn't there a story you knocking something on someone on purpose because they weren't wearing a helmet?
Now, I like that version of the story. And I wish the individual who took that shot was here right now, but he's sunning himself in Tucson, probably.
Was that Jack Tackle?
It was Jack, yeah. It was on the crux pitch of Oversight in Cody. A block did come free when I was tapping around it. And but it didn't fall. And I just left it where it was. I will never do such a thing again. I apologize. I sprinkled the ashes on my head, whatever. I left it. I didn't even think twice about it because I was pretty much out of my skull, terrified on this particular pitch, which I think the bottom of it was sort of wrap your hand, like where it touched. And Jack's thing was, I'm going to belay over here to the side so that when it collapses, I won't get wet. And I think by wet, he went with my bodily fluids as they came out of my body. But yeah, when he followed the pitch, he like swung his tool right under where that block was sitting, and it caused him to wear a helmet from then on, which actually turned into a good thing because a helmet that when I was running Gravel North America and he was one of the sponsored athletes, I'd given him one of the first Gravel helmets, which was using bike helmet technology. It was like one of the first sort of hard-skinned foam helmets, which he was wearing on Mount Augusta when he got hit by the briefcase-sized rock that ended that attempt with him and Charlie and started this whole, a pretty fucking incredible rescue.
That's a great story.
Get him out of there. So happily, it was a gift that I left for him on Oversight to cause him to wear helmets, or to compel him, inspire him, motivate him to wear a helmet later, which then saved his life probably.
Balin, I saw you have a course coming up that's for advanced align. So I'd like to know when you're gonna cut off the attendance, and if I could sign up. That would be.
I don't even know. I'm not sure how to respond to that.
Okay. Well, let me know.
Yeah, I'll let you know.
Sure.
Have you read Torque Might?
I am unfamiliar with it.
Really?
Yeah.
Actually?
Yeah.
You should read that.
I thought the Adrenaline Mocktail was like one of the best videos I've seen.
No, it's on Cascade Climbers.
Okay.
Titled Torque Might. It's basically your fan fiction.
Oh shit. Is there anything good?
I'm trying to remember the line. I know one is like the Gore-Tex feels so delicious on my naked skin. And to feel, the reason why I climb is to feel so close to dying and kissing another man. Equal possibilities and sensations, something like that. It's pretty good.
That sounds feasible. I mean, like, I've spooned with a lot of dudes. Okay, Cascade Climbers. So, do I need to give them an email address that'll later get compromised? It's a burner email. So let me.
It's just on the form.
I have to check this out.
You should.
Yeah. You write some follow-up chapters. Just someone in the back raised it. Yes.
If you guys had to go back and climb the reality mountain again, would you go face glitter?
Would I?
Both of you.
I mean, I did it once. Yeah, sure.
I mean, most of the young climbers that I find pretty inspiring do put glitter on their faces. I mean, there's a whole team of French guys who did some pretty badass stuff in Alaska. They do have the best team name, which is the Kitty Boys. And, I mean, Elias loves cats,
So we love
Elias. Yeah, so glitter should be a thing. In fact, I think, some products should come with glitter when you buy them. I mean, instead of putting that ridiculous find my body shit in the, you should just be able to like hit a little button here and have glitter just fall down from your hood.
Is there a particular, this goes for both of you guys, is there a particular punk ballad that comes to mind that you associate with the reality bath?
Punk ballad or band?
Song.
I mean,
I defer to you.
I mean, when I was on it, I think I was mostly listening to Tool.
Lindsay wants to know which one.
Mostly just Anima, or Enema, or however you pronounce it.
Who knows?
But the slow pulse board, I feel like goes with it pretty well.
How did you find that?
Well,
song?
that you played it at your presentation. Well, I think I had a friend who asked you.
Okay.
He sent you a message of your like playlist for that night.
Nice.
It's that one and Turquoise Days.
Yeah. Somebody asked the same thing about the presentation in Cody also. I had the same answer because the same. For me, it's a New Model Army song called "The Charge," because it's all about the Light Brigade charging into the Valley of Death, and I thought that seemed pretty appropriate for that route. Yeah.
You and colleagues like Blanchard and Krakauer have wrote a lot about your first ascents and other people's first ascents, just hard things that you're doing in climbing. There are a lot of young people pushing the sports these days and maybe don't have the ability to tell those stories or don't find the need to tell those stories. Mm-hmm. Why do you think it's important for these younger generations that are pushing the limits to tell the same stories that you and your colleagues have told in the past?
Because, part of it is because they're having their own experience, right? And everything, like if one could tease words out of Randy about, for him to describe, asking him to describe the reality bath, it would be, we were there at the same time. It had shared the, same space, same thing, but our experiences were totally different. And that's, I think, important is to share because, like, what has been written already, people will maybe not identify with. As generations progress. And a lot of, at a certain point in our lives where I think maybe we're doing things that make us feel somewhat marginalized. Maybe we're doing things that are out of the norm that we can't, I can't communicate with people who don't do the same thing that I'm doing or don't understand it. And that can lead to quite a sense of aloneness or feeling. And when these things are broadcasted, especially in a very sincere and heartfelt and authentic fashion, I think it's a really wonderful signifier because there's somebody else out there that is hoping they're not alone. And that's how, and I'll just say that I didn't go soloing because I couldn't find people to climb with. I went soloing because I wanted that experience. I think, but finding people who resonated like that, some form of communication. It's how I think we find our peers, especially in a world where there's can be largely disassociated and communicating just via our technical devices, and then also because it's super fucking inspiring for someone like me to read about what people are doing now, and so there was, I will say that, after the Slovak route on Denali with Scott and Steve, basically Scott and I said, Steve, it's yours, we're done, go. I want to know what happens with it, who gets it next, who sees it and is inspired by it, who is changed by reading something and doing something, and I think it's important that there are records of what's, sort of what's done, because if we don't go looking, like, I'll say that when Henry Barber went to Dresden for the first time and realized that these dudes are climbing fucking barefoot and using jammed knots in constrictions in order, as the form of protection, he had read about it. He knew that was a kind of a possibility, but then going there and being, but that's the draw for him. He's like, ethics are so pure in this place. If people hadn't written about it in these magazines, he would never have been drawn there and then compelled to become more than he was before he arrived. So I think that communication is important for a bunch of reasons. And also, like, if I hadn't written those things, then this, some of these ideas wouldn't be passed on and seen, and and then, like, they still might not be repeated.
Question?
Building off that, what was your rationale for soloing it as opposed to climbing it with somebody?
Well, I think I originally had planned to climb with Adam, but then his foot was fucked up or something, so he had to go to a physical therapist appointment. But I mean, on the drive back, the previous day climbing, I saw it was in. I'm like, I'm not sure if he'd be a great partner for it. Like if my partner Ethan was with me, I would definitely have done it with him if he wanted to, but I didn't really want to like reach out to a random person and climb with them. Plus, it didn't seem that hard.
Fair enough.
How many times did you do the 300 workout in preparation?
What's the 300 workout?
That's all you need to say.
Oh.
That's the perfect answer. Well played. Oh, man. Yeah. Last question.
Mike, you talk about getting inspired by the next generation of climbers. Is there any route that you'd like to see the next generation climb?
There's a face. China would have to change some rules, but there's a whole side of these peaks that people are familiar with in Pakistan that the Chinese border goes across the top of. So the Chinese side of the Gasherbroms, there's some extraordinary things, and some people have been in there. But the big thing is, and now I can't remember the name of the summit. There's a big face. It looks like the west face of Makalu, but but it drops into the Chinese side, if I'm not mistaken. And Bridwell showed me a picture of it, I don't know, 20 years ago. He goes, this is the future. 20 years ago, 30, I don't know. There is so much stuff out there. I mean, I think all the peaks that are not quite 8,000 meters, we could say G4, G3 this year. Maybe that route on Ski and Kangri that Michael Kennedy and Jeff Lowe tried would be an interesting thing. I don't think the rock is that great, but I don't think that's what stopped them. I kind of think the possibilities are still endless, in a way. The one that I really wanted to see get done in good style is the north face of Janu, and that's been done. Now, obviously, there's other lines on the face, but that was pretty impressive. And let's see. How about this? Any route that the Russians sieged the fuck out of in Alpine style? You had
I whispered
a whisper.
Ridge, but that's kind of silly.
You said
Hummingbird?
Hummingbird. Interesting to try.
I think like northwest face of Devil's Sun would be.
Oh yeah.
That'd be a bit cooler. Less
Yes.
Snowy, but still snowy.
Can be.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I'm trying to think what year it was that Krakauer went up to try that. Ended up soloing the Devil's Thumb, but he'd gone for that phase, and I think it was I think his vision was quite a bit ahead of his time, or its time for that, for sure. Yeah. Jack, you want to take over? And
Well, let's give a big round of applause. Well, thank you everybody for coming out tonight. We're going to finish off tonight with the raffle that we promised at the start.